what I wanted to kind of touch on is leadership in the channel and leadership within a business that is scaling rapidly.
Yeah.
Is one of the biggest challenges I see, having experienced it within businesses and also see it from our partners where they're growing and they're at that stage where they think, oh, actually, we need some funding, but we can really explode. That's a very dangerous point within that business where I've seen some spend loads of cash, hire loads of people, go away from their mission statement, core values, and fail. And then others where they've stayed consistent and they've built and added those bits in and, you know, maintained. And obviously for you with such a massive business like Daisy, there has been probably, and these bits want to unpack, points on that journey where you could quite easily have made the wrong decision and the house of cards, if you like, collapses because you maybe are acquiring businesses, integrating them, we're going to do this, and you could have lost track quite easily and it failed. And I think sometimes people don't factor in when speaking to people like you that there are these dangers within there. It's not all plain sailing. I know we joked about it off camera. You're like, oh, it's been easy, never any stress. But before we get into that, where were you? Where did you grow up then? Where are you originally from, Dave?
So originally from London, so not that far from here. Yeah, so originally from London. And without going through the whole of my career, I guess. You know, I guess I got involved in telecoms in the very early 90s. So, you know, been around now for a fair amount of time.
What was your first, in terms of getting into telecoms in the 90s? Was that through sales? Was that through technical support? Was it a sales element that started you on that?
So I now need to go back even further, unfortunately. So I got involved in sales in 1985 with my first sales role. And actually, it was a lesson. So the reason why I got into sales was I'm a carpenter and joiner by trade. So that's what when I left school, got a job, I went to college, got myself your City and Guilds and basically become a carpenter and joiner. And then I was with somebody who was going to a wedding. Now, bear in mind, this was in the 80s. And, I was probably dressed at the weekend like Don Johnson, Miami Vice, like pair of chinos, espadrilles,
Some of us still dress like that. I'll be honest with you, this is swell for me.
But and I remember this person said to me, look, we're going to a wedding and you can't dress like that. You've got to have a suit. So I went, and bear in mind, this was in the 80s. I paid £100 for a suit. I remember buying it from Marylebone Road, paid £100 for a suit, which is probably a couple of weeks' wages for me at that time.
Well, thinking I'm going to have to chisel a lot of walls for this.
It was, yeah. And so anyway, so I bought the suit, and then I wore it the once. And then I realised I'm never going to wear this suit again because I'm a joiner. So on that basis, I never need to wear this suit again. And actually, I wanted to get value for money out of that suit. So the only way, and I was talking to friends of mine, I said, look, I've bought this suit, and if I don't wear it again, it's a complete waste of money. So therefore, I need to work out what I can do to wear this suit.
Monetize the suit.
Yeah, and that was it. And it was about, so then I realised, that was the first lesson, that people don't mind spending as long as there is value for money in that spend. So I then decided to get involved in sales. I mean, friends of mine said, well, you talk a lot, so therefore,
You've got the gift of the gab.
Yeah, but we all know that sales isn't always about talking. But I didn't realise that at the time. I got involved in sales and kind of accelerated through. So it was because of that one event that changed my direction in what I was looking to do. Because I think I looked at,
because that's a big thing, though. Because if you think about it, sort of trades, and my father-in-law, he's in trade. It's pretty much. There's various illustrations of it, but you're going to do that for the rest of your career. You're going to be a joiner, and that's to be disciplined, and you're kind of putting your flag in the stand. And then you're going, actually, I've got this suit, and I look like Don Johnson, and I quite liked walking around Marble Road, and, that's appealing. And sale, you're kind of moving into sales to start with. And you get to speak to people as well, which is obviously a passion of yours. Was it did it tick a lot of boxes when you look back? At the time, was it kind of less planned, more, I've got this suit, I'm going to give it a go?
It was definitely less planned. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do, was the truthful answer. And funny enough, I was talking to somebody on the train on the way down. I'm still not sure I know. But I've done relatively well throughout that period. And yeah, I guess I got involved in telco as I said, in the early 90s. And it was in the mobile industry at that time. And I could not believe how easy it was. I mean, it was just, and I think because of the training that I'd had in sales, getting into mobiles was really, really simple. I kind of excelled at that. I mean, there's a few people that I know that are sitting in the industry. One person in particular that started with me at the same organisation. We both started. He still works in one of the networks. And we've kind of we're at a different journey, but we started at the same place. And I found it, I kind of excelled at it. I loved it. I loved what we was doing.
What did you love about it in terms of sales? Was it the achievement of winning, the monetary side, the sense of achievement of kind of growing and achieving more, and the sort of, because sales is an interesting discipline, isn't it? It's one where the old adage, the more you put in, the more you get out, and it can be very addictive. Did you just kind of you caught it and you were, this is the way?
But I think there's a couple of parts there. So, first of all, everybody loves to buy. Everybody loves to buy something, but they love to be sold to by a professional. They love to be sold to by somebody that actually really knows what they're talking about. And I used to use what we'd call KYC free. So know your customer, know your company, and know your competitors. So whenever I'm selling, I would also understand, right, okay, if my customer was saying something to me, what are they actually saying to me? How do I translate that into, their why? If I then look at, right, if they start talking about my competitors, I never run down a competitor because that's not what it's about. But actually, I need to understand where they're really, really good and where I'm maybe slightly in a different place. So I find, and then I need to understand from my company's point of view, how can I be the best version of me with the company?
What made you think like that? Was it through the journey into sales, or have you always had that sort of approach in terms of, outside of work, where you've always wanted to kind of listen and relate, be it wanting to persuade your mates maybe to go for a beer or family events? Have you always been able to kind of absorb certain information and to focus it and maneuver it a little bit to how and where you want it to go? And I'm looking at your face and I'm thinking maybe so.
I'm not 100%. I think I looked at probably the psychology of the sale. And if you look at the psychology, I'd always look and say, if somebody's saying something to me, what is it they're really, really saying? And for argument's sake, I'm going back. Bearing in mind this was the early 90s. I'm going back. Somebody would walk into the shop, and it happens now. And if I tell you the story, you're going to go, yeah, that starts to happen. But somebody walks into the shop, and the salesperson would get up and go over and say, hi, can I help? And then the customer, because they didn't like that, oh, you've been raiding my space, they'd go, I'm just looking. Yeah. And then the salesperson, oh, but I'm sitting over there. If you need me, come over and sit. And you go, right. So first of all, my view was, I know the customer is likely to say that. So what's my next follow-up? If I know, because my next follow-up can't be, but I'm sitting over in the chair, because he can see me when he walks in that I'm sitting over on the chair. So the moment the customer would walk in, if I decide that I'm going to get up, then I would basically get, hi, can I help? No, I'm just looking. Not a problem at all. Is it something you're looking for yourself or your other half? My other half. I'm back in the game again. So it was always about that psychological part.
Oh, it's really, really interesting there, Dave. I was talking to Vincent before, didn't he? And he said one of the kind of formative years was at PC World, and you had kind of two scenarios almost, a salesperson, where you're on the floor, and to his mind, it's probably say yours, people are walking in to the store. There is an inclination to look to buy something or to learn more about something that they want to buy. And you would have two people where, to your point, they go, oh, sorry, I'll be over here. Or you'd have someone that would maybe stand there and hope that someone meets them. Whereas you're kind of talking about being proactive, but being proactive based on feedback in terms of what they'll want to hear and how you can try and keep that face time and then hopefully maneuver forward to the customer into a sale as you're finding that information. And you're kind of starting that in the early 90s. At what point during that journey did you kind of, because you could quite easily have done the sales gig, sales director, chief revenue officer, but there's a point during that journey where you're kind of moving from the sales director role, Anglia, and into other businesses where you're responsible for your business as the CEO, where you're not just sales, you've got to look after the P&L, you'll look after the budget, people's welfare, all these different things. At what point does by the sounds of it, a natural salesperson go, do you know what, I want to shape a business. I feel I can add value, not just to the orders coming in.
Yeah. So I'll come back to that in a second. So let me just expand upon that. You know, I remember when I took over a particular part of the business, and I remember meeting one of the people in sales, and you know, we was acquiring lots of business and everything else. There was probably slight disarray and bits of, you know, when you try to put them all together. And I remember sitting down with a particular salesperson. I said, so why are we not selling to new customers? And they said, because our customer service is not great. I said, okay, tongue in cheek. I said, but the new customers don't know that yet. I said, you know, once you've sold to new customers and they say your customer service isn't that great, you go, okay, you're right. But you can't use that as a reason why you're not selling to new customers, because they don't know. So that was a really, really important part for me. And I remember sitting down and another person come up to me. Bear in mind, my background was in distribution, partnering, you know, and growing all the yeah, and it was, you know, and I remember one person said to me, well, you don't know what we do here. I said, right, okay. So they said, you know, they told me everything that I didn't, and I was just like, brilliant. I said, it's just so I can understand, have we got salespeople that know how to sell this product? Yeah. I said, have we got specialists that know how to support the product, customer services, you know, installers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And she went, yeah. I said, thank Christ for that. For a minute, I thought you wanted me to do it all. That is not what I'm there for. You know, so then what I then look at is go, okay, what am I there for? And I talk about the 4 key stakeholder management. 5 if you want to include ESG, but I'll keep that out for a second. I can get back to that afterwards if you want. You know, but for me, it's about how do we make sure, and in no particular order, but how do we make sure we look after the investor? Because the investor needs to think we are the best investment for their money. That's not because I'm there to support the investor. I want them to go, do you know what? I'm going to overly invest in you as an organization so you can grow that business. Therefore, once they're doing that, once I get them into a position where they're really happy, I then look at the employees.
And as well, the investors that really happy with you, they're not going, Dave, can we have 14 meetings a day? Can I control? They're giving you free reign, if you like, and the autonomy to run it how you see fit.
So anyone that knows, and you know, and there's been a few bits and pieces that have been quite interesting. But you know, I used to go into the board meetings at the very, very beginning, and basically I put some slides up, and because I wasn't, you know, polished and everything else of what I was doing at the time, I put up some slides, and the last slide would just be a tin of Ronseal, and that was it. And basically we just said, I remember sitting down with Matt, and he went, Ronseal, I said, if that's what we say we're going to do, it's exactly what we're going to do. That's exactly what we're going to deliver. And that was exactly what we end up doing. You know, and if you speak to anyone within Daisy, you know, anyone that's been around that, they would tell you, actually, no, they are definitely Ronseal. They are definitely, if they say they're going to do that. So that was about getting the investor absolutely on side. Then we can then focus on the employees. Now, I remember taking over this particular part of the business, and the directors were all in their offices, all at the end of the thing. I said, right, okay, well, they're coming out of there because we need to turn them offices into training rooms for our staff. And they said, but we haven't got any trainers. Right, that's my next part. We need to get some trainers to train our staff. So,
how did they react to losing their nice office?
That was absolutely fine. No. They were
open point.
Yeah, there was none whatsoever. Because at the end of the day, it was about providing you keep people on that mission. Yeah, what are we trying to do?
So I think it's the right thing. I definitely do. But there is a school of thought that, and you obviously had the right people there and went to change. It was smooth running. But that's quite a big call to go, right, out your offices. You with everyone. Sometimes in other businesses I've known, directors would have reacted and gone, no, we're not. We need an office. I've got to this position. There's a status to it, and all these sort of outdated things. But you had good people that kind of were like, yeah, understand.
It was absolutely fine. They need to, yeah. And don't know, some of them got offices back again, in different areas, in different parts of it. I never had an office. Never. Yeah, so whenever I went in there, I was always on the floor. Regardless whether it was upstairs or downstairs, I was always out. And I didn't.
Why was that? Because you wanted to hear what was going on,
I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be seen. That's it. For me, at the end, to create the right culture and everything else, you need to, you can't just be in, people talk about ivory towers and everything else. So I was always just being seen. So we then created an environment where people could learn. So we had our vision was about being better every day. Yeah. And what I liked about better every day was take the first initial BED, go to bed. You've been better, now go to bed. Next day, better every day again. And actually, we took people on that journey. We put in management training courses because what happens is people promote somebody to their level of incompetence, but you only do that by not
That's why I like
training.
photos on there.
Yeah, well, you only do that by not training them for the next role. If you train them for the next role, they don't become incompetent. They become the next person. So, and what happens, and funny, I've wrote something recently where they take the best salesperson and they make them a sales manager. And you go, well, actually, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the best sales manager. They was just the best salesperson. It might be because of they're selfish, or it might be because of loads of other things.
I've not said this before, I don't think. So the first job I ever had, I worked for a sales manager in finance. It's not on LinkedIn. He was the most successful salesperson in the business, driving a Porsche 911 as maybe 21, 22, Porsche 911, earning significant sums of money. So they did that exact move and put him in a manager role. And I remember I did a week's induction and he said, right, you've had your training. I don't expect any questions at all. And literally they were just churning people because they'd put him and thought he'll be able to train people. And it wasn't his, at that time, skill set. He was a brilliant salesperson, but a terrible leader.
Yep.
Terrible man.
And that's the point, though, isn't it? Because you change the environment that they was really, really good in and expect them to be good in a different environment, and they're not. So that becomes the challenge. So, so by doing that, so we was making the investors were happy. So they was investing into us as an organization. Our employees, we went from we wouldn't do a survey to actually 2 stars in best companies to work for. So that was going in the right direction. Then what we needed to look at was the customer services, because actually we knew, as the salesperson said to me, well, we don't sell to new customers because our customer service, it's not where it needs to be. Therefore, how do we improve our customer services? So we start putting metrics in there. So we start measuring, and that's the part. It's about the measurement. What are you measuring? Because if you measure the end result, then it's too late. The end result is way, way too late. You need to measure way before that. If you're in sales, France, how many calls are you making?
On that question, but what prompted you, though, as potentially could have been really selfish salesperson, leader, could have been sales, to go into, I want to lift the bonnet up on this business, focus on customer service, focus on the culture, deal with investors. I want all these new headaches as opposed to sell loads of stuff. And what was in you that was kind of like, I want it all. I wanted to own every aspect. What when you look back now, what do you think kind of pushed you into that?
So I think there's a couple of parts. So my favourite saying is I'd rather have 1% of 100 people than 100% of myself. Because at 1% I can move to 2%, I can move to 3%, I can keep on moving it. 100% of myself, I'm done. So at the end of the day, I believe that to be successful, you need to serve people. You need to take people on a journey. So for me, it was always about people. I'm very much focused on how can we get the best out of you. I think it was Albert Einstein that once said, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree because it's useless at climbing trees. Put it in the right environment, it's absolutely superb. And that was what I was always looking at. How do we make sure that we get the best out of you? I don't believe that anybody turns up for work, and I'm sure every now and then, but nobody really turns up for work, says, you know what, I'm going to put a shocking day's work in today because I can't be bothered. So at the end of the day,
You've been speaking to my boss over here.
But that's the point. So at the end of the day, if there are people like that, it's how do we motivate you or do something else to get you going in the right direction?
And during that period where you're working within Daisy comms, then into Daisy distribution, Daisy com. Are there any points within there where you're feeling stale or you need to reinvent yourself? Because it's like I said to you outside, what's really rare with yourself and only a handful of other people is CEOs typically, so like a chief revenue officer, their average shelf life is, I think, 18 months. The CEO, couple of years, 2-3 years, and maybe an investor will go, right, I want a new head, or, they'll maybe get poached from it. It's very rare for CEO to stay so long within a business and see constant growth there. because there needs to be it's a bit like, if you like football, like an Alex Ferguson thing where there's that reinvention and he's constantly driving to improve. He didn't get stale, whereas other football managers, maybe after a few years, you kind of say, well, they're a bit stale. They need, what drove you to keep in that role, keep growing? Is it your constant change, like you individually? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a very unusual thing, to be honest, because most would have done 4 or 5 years there, said, thanks, Mark, very much. I'm going to go over to blah, blah, blah as a CEO. They've asked me, they've offered me some equity, and then I'm going to do that for a few years. And then I'm going to, whereas you've been very loyal and very consistent within the same business.
But I think that, you know, if I forget the mission for a second, but actually, if I think about our vision was about being better every day. So, and when we launched our vision to be better every day, I then decided, bearing in mind, I've been CEO for, I don't know, 7, 8 years or whatever in the business. And I then decided, actually, it must have been less than that. I then decided that I'm going to go and go to university. So, and literally, if I go back to my school days, I left school at the age of 15. I'm sure my exam results would have said that he turned up. That would have been it. That wasn't great. I then decided that I want to be the best version of myself. So I then went to do a master's, an MBA at Manchester University. While this was just as we was coming out of COVID. Yeah, so it was only a few years.
Running a business during a global.
We were doing some of the biggest deals, biggest acquisitions we've done at the time. We was running the business, trying to maintain everything and growing throughout that period as well. So we were doing really, really well. And ended up doing an MBA throughout that period.
Why?
Because I wanted it. And
that's the question, because you.
Well, I think it's a really, so we was all on and everyone was talking about why they were on there doing the MBA. So one of them was, I want to get a better job, I want to get more salary, I want to get all these things.
Yeah.
And I said, look, all of the things that you're talking about, the better job, I said, I have all of that. I have everything that you're talking about. I have the job that I love. I enjoy the industry that I'm in, etc., etc. So I've got all of that. I said, I'm on here to be the best version of me for the benefit of all the staff that work for me. I said, because I believe that they deserve to have the best person looking after their interests. That's the only reason why I'm on there. And that was, if you think about the motivating factors to get you through something. I mean, bearing in mind, they started talking about referencing. I'd never done referencing in my life. There was loads of things that were kind of new to me, and new ways of learning and everything else. So I had to push myself through that, knowing that the only reason why I'm doing it, not to get another salary, because I had a different view, not to get a better job, I already had that, but actually to be the best version of me for the benefit of all the staff. That was the only reason why I was on there.
How was it then? Because ultimately, and I agree with everything you say, but there has to be points as a CEO or a manager of a growing business where you have to make difficult decisions that people don't like, for want of a better description, for the betterment of the business. It could be you've acquired a business and it's left you with 2 HR directors, 2 marketers, and there has to be a natural churn.
Yeah.
How did you marry those sort of decisions during your career where you're perceived negatively by certain people who are impacted, but you know it's the right thing? Was that a challenge for you?
I think someone once said to me that if you want to make everyone happy, sell ice cream, because everyone loves your ice cream, man. So you're not going to make everybody happy all of the time. But it is a challenge on the basis. There is a challenge with, when you take over a different organization and you know that certain people, but you need to, if you're going to do that, you need to try to do that as quick as you possibly can, because otherwise people will be thinking it anyway. So therefore, you need to go, right, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what, and just go, right, this is what we need to focus on, and then we can carry on. Then we can grow. We're not doing it because we don't like the individuals or anything else. We're doing it because we want to grow a business.
So I'm doing it as a collective. And then in terms of now, we're fast forwarding over years. It's the benefit, I guess, of having a 40-minute period. You've kind of gone from 1980s to the 2020s now in the space of 20 minutes. But when you're kind of out now and you're looking at the industry, the channel and things like that, and you've got that, I guess you can have that full 360 view where you're not in the beast. You can kind of speak to friends and people that you know in the industry. As we're kind of looking at a few external issues in the world, what if you were a business in the channel now? Would you be excited? Would you be wary of certain things? Where do you see the sort of opportunities? I'm deliberately kind of throwing quite a wide question because you have a wide circumference in terms of 360, and you can kind of look at it. If you were, so what's your view on the market now? A lot of these businesses are kind of walking around here. Would you be excited? Would you be battening down the hatches? What would you do?
So I think there's always excitement in this industry. It's a great, and you'll have people that say, "Oh, do you know what? It's a challenge. There's tough times." But actually, it depends on what you focus on. Now, you as you interviewed Flowtech earlier on, and I would imagine that they'd be saying, actually, the industry is great because their starting position is slightly different from maybe some other people's starting position. They're growing. So, and at the end of the day, they're looking at acquisitions. So, and I think when you start looking at acquisitions, you really need to understand, why am I doing it? Why am, and a lot of people want to jump on that because they look at the likes of Daisy that have done really, really well with that, acquired loads of businesses, put them together. But they need to understand, why are you going to go on an M&A spree? Is it for scope? Is it for scale? Is it adding products? But if you go back into the 90s, or actually in the early 2000s, you'd have people that really, really focused on selling mobile, never focused on selling fixed line. And the same way, you'd have people focused on fixed line, never selling mobile. What's happened? Then two different types of organizations have now started growing over that period. So all of a sudden, the mobile person is now selling fixed line, they're now selling systems. So what you do is, if I'm going to make numbers up, but let's say that the mobile industry was worth $1 billion. If you was only selling mobile, your marketplace is $1 billion. But if you sell fixed line, that's another $1 billion. You've now doubled your marketplace. If you then say, well, actually, I'm going to put telephone systems on there, you're now at $3 billion. So then you start looking at, what am I adding, and what people in this industry are absolutely brilliant at, whether it's from an entrepreneurial type individuals, is actually, how do we look to grow organizations? How do we look to, and the ones that are growing are the ones that are saying, you know what, absolutely, let's add cybersecurity. You talk about the challenges around the world at this moment in time. Cybersecurity is obviously one of the key things.
Well, that's the big thing, isn't it? At the minute, where you've got ISPs moving to MSPs, and there is opportunity, but it's fraught with challenges in terms of the expertise in those areas. But I totally agree with you in terms of, if I'm looking at the market, to your point, if you just sell the one product, that's great, but that's all you'll ever sell. And I think we are seeing resellers, some of them are dipping their toes in the market a little bit in terms of different products. I mean, you probably saw that historically with, from your vantage point inwards, and you're seeing more of it now. If someone doesn't do that, and the way the market's changing, do you think a business is at risk of kind of not succeeding or not growing to the extent that they want to?
Depends on what they want to do. Some people are set up and all they want
lifestyle business.
Correct. That's all they want. They want a lifestyle business. They want a salary. They want, and brilliant. Well done. And there are some people that go, you know what? I want to build a business and I want to sell it and I want to go and retire. Absolutely brilliant. And there are others that are kind of in between. And it depends on where you are. And that's why I talk, when I talk about to founders and people looking to sell their business, the first question I ask them is, so what are you going to do next? Because if you can't work out what you're going to do next, then actually it's find it really, really difficult to go, I'm going to sell the business, because you kind of draw back into it. So I think there are differences out in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's I was talking to James Buston, MD at a company in Telford, Associated Telecom, and said, how's your normal house business? And most people current they'll say, oh, it's a bit tough out there, but his view was, there's always business there. You've just got to be proactive and hunt for it. He wouldn't allow the mentality of, there's not opportunity.
Yeah.
There's opportunity in everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a thing, I think, in terms of mindset of the industry, I think if you're not looking to grow, there's a chance you'll go backwards. Even if you want to stay the same, you should be looking to.
Yeah, I mean, I remember speaking to a friend of mine recently, and he said, how's things? I said, you know what, it's so we're doing all right in a tough marketplace, but we're doing all right. He said, Dave, you've been saying that for the last 23 years. You have been exceedingly growing and everything else. And the only reason I talk about that is, it's a little bit like, if you're not falling down with your skiing, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. So you're going to find it, there are going to be different challenges out there. You just got to go, how do we overcome it? Because I think the moment people become comfortable, that's when the challenge starts kicking in. So you've always got to be looking and going,
that's exactly my whole point and why I was so keen to speak to you today is you haven't got comfortable during that period, but a lot of people would have got comfortable as a CEO of a business. They'd have got really comfortable, and then suddenly there's more holidays, they're devolving more things down. And I know you'll have seen it in other areas, but you've never got comfortable. If anything, you've gone, do you know what? There's a pandemic. I'm leading a business. I'm leading the culture. I need to go and add a master's degree as well. Your nature is just, and that's obviously helped, and that's coming across really clear. And, I guess my kind of last question, I know we touched on it before, is you've obviously got still shed loads more to give. Where do you see yourself? Are you working? Is it very much working with businesses to support them in terms of advisory? Do you see yourself getting back in as a CEO of a business? It's not a job interview. I'd be working for you if it was. But where do you see yourself? Or you just kind of happy at the minute?
Listen, if I look at our mission that we used to use our missions, probably going to change. But I talk about keep Britain working, and the reason why I think keep Britain working is so important is the more people contribute to society, better society becomes. So if I can help organisations grow their business, then absolutely I'm going to look at going, right, how do I help you grow? If there's some words of wisdom that I can support an organisation or just point them in the right direction, absolutely I'm up for that. There will be different roles out there. I've got too much energy to go, I'm not going to do nothing. But actually, I guess I'm fortunate enough that I don't need to just jump at something. But I do want to support.
You can pick. You're not kind of, if I leave this job today, I'm pretty much getting another one. I think it's really, I'll kind of finish on this. I mean, Jay and Dave, when we were talking about mergers and acquisitions, they really, both of them stressed the importance of businesses having support, executive support, be it from, if they're doing a merger and acquisition, having that person who's been there, done it, an advisor, if you like, strategic advisor that will help these businesses.
Jay, give me a call then.
Yeah. But, it's impossible when we do these things, Dave, to go through such a career in a short period of time. It's impossible. It's been a privilege to be sat opposite you. And hopefully people watching at home have seen some value, to stay in the same business for so long and just be constantly challenging yourself to progress. And we've not even touched on the amazing charity work you've done. And, I'd encourage anyone to look at that and to donate, because there's amazing causes. I would not do that. I will sponsor you, but I would not swim that. I'd probably have a heart attack. But it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. And, I'm sure if you're a business owner out there and you need some strategic advice, you need someone that's been there, maybe got the odd scar from previous experiences who can advise you, that's invaluable. It's better to be advised than to learn yourself the hard way. So thank you so much, Dave, for your time. It's really appreciated.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, Will.
So,
Thanks a lot.
thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.